Good afternoon, everyone. My name's Ashley Cruz, and I'm the manager of community engagement here at the Mental Health Foundation. Before we begin, we would like to acknowledge that what we call Alberta is the traditional and ancestral territory of many First Nations, Métis, and Inuit, who, for generations, have lived on and cared for these lands. Our work as the Mental Health Foundation takes place on the historical and contemporary Indigenous lands, including the territories of Treaties 6, 7, and 8, and a portion of the Métis homeland, including Regions 1 through 6. Since we're in a virtual environment today and we can see we have lots of folks attending from all over the province as well as outside Alberta, I would also like to acknowledge that no matter where you're tuning in from, we offer respect and gratitude for the land. Today, our topic is more than just a bad day, understanding depression. We know that depression is difficult to go through and it can be challenging to help anyone experiencing it. Today, our facilitators will focus on understanding depression as a mental illness. By the end of this interactive session, we hope you will have learned a little bit more about depression, including the differences between sadness and depression, common signs and symptoms of depression, and treatment options and supportive strategies for coping. If you enjoyed today's session, please do let us know. There'll be a short 5-question survey to capture your feedback at the end. We do read every response to ensure we continue improving these sessions. Now, I am pleased to introduce our wonderful facilitators. For those who are regular attendees of our Lunch and Learns, you will notice that these are two new faces today, and I'm so excited for you to meet them. So, Renata Logan is a registered psychologist supporting couples and families in strengthening their relationships. She also supports healthcare workers in maintaining their mental wellness. Anne Renee Sherjang is a registered therapeutic counselor whose background is working primarily in inpatient populations, supporting children, youth, and families. Anne Renee is also a sessional instructor at MacEwan University in the Child and Youth Care program. And both Renata and Anne Renee are health promotion facilitators with Recovery Alberta professional practice and education services in the Edmonton zone. So we're so excited to have them as our, experts in the house to facilitate these lunch and learn sessions. So without any further ado, I will hand it over to you, Anne Renee.
Thank you so much, Ashley. So glad to be here and listening to all the things that were mentioned about what we're going to talk about today is a lot. So why don't we go ahead and kind of just jump in? And so thanks for being here, everyone. We do want you to know before we kind of dive in that the information in today's presentation does come from a variety of evidence-based sources as well as from the professional experience of our team. And really, it's meant to supplement, not to replace any information or treatment that's provided to you by a therapist, a doctor, or a healthcare professional. And so again, we do want to really take a look at, what mental health is, the difference between depression and sadness, some signs and symptoms, as well as some treatment options, along with some supportive strategies. So I want to start us off with a little bit of a question here, and you can just pop your thoughts into the chat here. And so what do you think about this statement? Would you say you mostly agree or mostly disagree that depression is just sort of part of life? Depression is just sort of a normal part of everyday life. What do we think? So I have some disagrees coming up in the chat. A lot of disagrees, mostly disagree. Yeah, a lot of you seem to be thinking it's kind of something that you might disagree with. And in fact, you would be right in that, if we think about depression as kind of this significant sadness, and if you were in agreement with that statement, you would be right. However, these temporary feelings of sadness, they're normal. They're part of our human experience, usually reflect our response to a bit of a temporary setback, maybe a stressful event. As time passes, some of those depressive responses tend to fade away. We kind of get busy. We re-engage with our everyday activities. We kind of bounce back. And we would say we sort of bounce back within about 2 weeks or so. Now, if you mostly disagreed with the statement, you would actually also be correct. We would say that those sustained feelings of sadness or hopelessness for periods of longer than 2 weeks really are not typical. And they might represent clinical depression that does require formal treatment by a trained professional. And so it is kind of this last description that we really want to take a closer look at today. sometimes it's hard, right, to kind of tell the difference when someone is, within kind of their lowest points. Are they feeling distressed, nearing actual depression? Hard to tell sometimes, right? Now, as noted, sadness is a normal emotion that we all experience from time to time in our lives. Sometimes we might use the word depression to describe sadness, or maybe when we're kind of just feeling low or feeling a bit blue. And so it really is important for us to kind of distinguish the difference between these things. So let's try to do that. First of all, with sadness, we often have the feelings that usually reflect a bit of a setback or a stressful event that has occurred. We can pinpoint it to that. Those sad feelings also usually, as we said, will fade within about 2 weeks or so. The feelings are a bit more temporary, sometimes even just kind of momentary. And then also, we usually learn some different coping strategies that kind of get us back to normal, help us to kind of find ourselves again and be more equipped if, potentially those situations come up in the future. However, when someone has significant sadness for a longer period of time and it begins to affect their overall functioning across different parts of their life, they may at that point be experiencing a form of clinical depression. Now, this is a real medical condition. It's something that has significant symptoms and needs to be addressed. With depression, sadness, irritability, and despair, these can last for weeks, sometimes months, or even longer. And so it is more than just kind of feeling down or feeling blue. So when regular sadness usually occurs in response to a specific trigger, depression can change in mood. And this might happen regardless of what's going on for that individual at that time. Now, although depression can affect anyone at any time, it does seem to strike most often when a person is going through changes. So we think of things like going through a loss or a time of transition, maybe the onset of an illness, which can leave a person feeling sort of helpless or hopeless, kind of almost stuck. Now, the feelings can potentially be quite debilitating, and the individual becomes more withdrawn, more isolated, and often is using some unhealthy coping mechanisms, things like guilt, self-blame, maybe substances, or even self-harm. Now, depression will have an impact on more than one area of someone's life. And so these intense symptoms often do require therapy, sometimes medication, to really help us to overcome some of these very intense feelings. Now, this graph you see on your screen right now really sort of illustrates ways that our mood can fluctuate. So if you take a look at the black line, which is kind of in the middle of your screen, you kind of see the middle of the graph, and that really represents what we call a baseline mood. So for some people, it's a little bit higher from time to time. For some people, it's a little bit lower from time to time, but we do sort of all have kind of what we would say is a normal mood by our own standards or kind of suiting our own natural temperament. For many of us, when we think about it, our baseline mood is typically pretty hopeful, pretty positive, right? Now take a look at this green kind of squiggly line. And that really represents our mood and how it can fluctuate over the course of a day. Some of us have exciting moments, some of us have, more down moments. So if we try to kind of paint a picture of what might be going on with this squiggly line, maybe I get annoyed, I can't find my car keys, right? I hear a sad story, for example, my mood maybe dips down a bit. Excuse me, that's where you see that fluctuation. Now, it might also go up. Maybe I finish a tough project I was working on. I have a visit with a loved one. So again, our mood typically is always fluctuating throughout the day. But for the most part, it is kind of contained within sort of that red line and that lower blue line. It's also normal for our mood to temporarily go outside the red line or the blue line. Now, this might be things like you get married or you get a job promotion. You feel happier than kind of just the normal influxes of a day. We can also think of that in the opposite direction, thinking we lose a loved one, we get laid off from our job. This becomes, kind of these dips that we see below. Now, here's what happens. In clinical depression, someone's mood is so significantly below their baseline, and it actually stays kind of down below their baseline. So without treatment, they really continue to struggle to return to their optimum zone of functioning. Notice too, in this kind of squiggly line that's well below the blue line, with depression, that one's mood still does kind of fluctuate. We still have some ups, we still have kind of some, lower downs within that. Some moments of the day will still feel better, but it is important to kind of just recognize that that overall baseline mood is quite a bit below what we would say is average for most. So let's talk for a minute about how common depression is. So clinical depression is found in about 2% of children, 4 to 8% of teenagers, but we see a big jump in the adult population, and that goes up to about 19 or so percent for those above the age of 8. Now, symptoms most commonly do start to appear within that teen or young adult years. It's also commonly occurring at the same time as potential other challenges. So, we often see depression kind of with other mental health conditions, things like anxiety, potentially substance abuse, for example. And this is often referred to as comorbidity or co-occurring. It just means that two things are sort of happening or going on at the same time. And in fact, studies show that about 20% of individuals that already are struggling with depression are also struggling with substance abuse, um, and that there's a huge chance of also struggling with anxiety as well. Now, when we think about the depression rates within the difference between boys and girls, for example, this kind of, becomes sort of an interesting thing to look at. In our younger kids, the number is about the same. We don't notice a lot of changes. However, in adolescence and into adulthood, females are actually 2 times more likely to be diagnosed with depression than males. And the reason for this, kind of can vary potentially, but some researchers are kind of wondering if often men sort of stay a bit more under the radar, right? Expressing some of their depression in maybe more external ways, things like an increase in aggression or maybe risk taking. So we see it a little bit differently than what it actually might be. There's other researchers that suggest that women are a bit more likely to struggle with depression due to ongoing physiological changes in their bodies that they go through, things like puberty, pregnancy, or menopause. Now, around 7% of seniors do have some symptoms of depression, and about 1/3 of people with prolonged physical illness, things like diabetes or heart disease, or other mental illnesses, experience a higher level of depression as well. 1/3 of people with prolonged illness experience depression. Apologies for that. So, a question for all of you, and again, we're going to use the chat box just to take a look at this. What are some of the signs that we might see in someone who's struggling with depression or some depressive issues? So, go ahead. What do you think? Something to kind of think about, maybe things that you've seen from others, maybe things you notice in yourself. What are some thoughts? So, someone says withdrawing, tiredness, isolating yourself. Yeah, someone else says withdrawn, becoming really moody, also very common. Not engaging in activities that you like, right? So if you were out at the gym a couple times, a couple times within a week, now, maybe you're not going to the gym at all. Yeah. Not sleeping. Yeah. And we could see the opposite of that too, right? We have some people who might sleep a lot more than they usually do. We definitely see people who are not sleeping. Not loving what you normally love, or kind of having that lack of interest in engagement in things. Someone also says a change in eating habits. Yeah. And these are all really, really great responses, lots of good things. And someone else says an increase in isolation. Yeah. Thanks so much, everybody, for sharing. And it's a lot of things, right? All the way from, the basics like eating and sleeping, all the way up to, just really struggling to kind of get out there and, kind of be part of, everyday life. So yeah, thank you so much, everybody, for sharing all those great responses. One of the most important things that we hope that you kind of take away from today's presentation is really looking for patterns. And what we mean by this is patterns of change. Those times when you notice that something is different and it's not going away. So we want to think about things like a change in mood or thoughts that someone's having. Maybe looking at their body and their overall health. Many of you mentioned food and sleep. And then also thinking about behaviors, including things like their academic performance, maybe work performance. What are their relationships looking like? These are all things, excuse me, that we want to take a closer look at, definitely. Now, the Diagnostic and Statistical Manual, which we kind of refer to as the DSM-5 because it's tricky to say, really lists a bunch of different types of depressive disorders. And so today, we really want to focus on one that's referred to as a major depressive disorder. And here's some things that you might see. Some of that persistent sadness or irritability, feelings of worthlessness or low self-esteem, thoughts of death potentially, or even thinking about suicide. Loss of interest can come up. Yeah. Changes in eating or weight, as many of you mentioned, in sleep, we see some changes. Some noticeable slowing down of thought or movement, right? Again, kind of that lack of interest, lack of energy, and difficulty concentrating. So, lots of things that we want to sort of be considering. And so when we think about someone being diagnosed with a major depressive disorder, they do have to have at least five or more of those symptoms that we just talked about. And then a couple other things that we need to consider. Those symptoms need to kind of really be impacting the person's life, having a negative impact on the person, on their relationships, on their daily activities. Also, there can't be any other reason for those symptoms. So we could think of other medical disorders, things like hyperthyroidism, as just an example, autoimmune diseases, right? Many of these things unrelated to a major depressive disorder can still cause many of those symptoms. As we mentioned earlier, we do want to see those symptoms for at least 2 weeks. But here's something important to note. If you're suspecting that someone is struggling, don't wait 2 weeks. You don't have to wait the 2 weeks. If you're really, kind of worried or nervous about someone, seek help when you're concerned. And then finally, like we said, these symptoms should reflect a bit of a change, something that goes kind of opposite or quite different from that person's kind of normal way of being. So, when we look at how depressive episodes potentially can reoccur if they're left untreated, it's actually some really important data out there. So, first of all, up to 60% of those individuals who have just one episode of a major depressive disorder are more likely to have another throughout their life. And in fact, 70% of those individuals who have two episodes will have a third. And then 90% of those who have three or more episodes of a major depressive disorder will, in fact, continue to have them throughout their life. So it is so important that we take a look at early recognition and treatment right away to improve the prognosis over that individual's life. So that's a quick, fast, look at some of those things that we want to kind of be looking at. But now that we understand how depression is defined, just thinking of the medical community, let's take a look at a few other factors that can kind of contribute. And for that, I have another question for you. I'll just open my chat here. Depression symptoms look the same for everyone, regardless of age. True, false? What do you think? Depression symptoms look the same for everyone, regardless of their age. So I'm seeing a lot of false come in. A lot of false. Yeah, awesome, everybody. And in fact, you are correct. The answer is false. And it's important for us to kind of keep that in mind that any age group can look quite different in terms of, what we might be noticing. And symptoms of depression in adolescents and adults typically does look relatively similar, but symptoms in children can actually look quite different from that. And so it can look similar to anxiety or some potential attention issues. Now, we can typically expect more somatic or physical symptoms, things like headaches, tummy aches, with some of that heightened irritability or crankiness that someone mentioned earlier in the chat. They might struggle with things like weight gain. But things like sleep and appetite in our younger kids tend to be unaffected. Their mood is not always necessarily going to look sad or low per se. They might still show smiles, but, and have the capacity to play, but we just kind of notice that something might be a little bit different. And so that's an important piece that we just want to kind of mention as well. Now, again, if left untreated, depression may affect our emotional, cognitive, and our social skills. That creates an increased risk for struggles in things like school or work. We have substance misuse, potential legal issues, additional medical issues that get in the way, as well as things like that self-harm or those suicidal kind of thoughts or tendencies. And actually, 60% of those who are depressed also do report having thoughts of suicide, and about 30%, in fact, will take their own lives. And that's a hard number to hear. But it's also really important for us to have that awareness and to know that number. Now, as previously noted, individuals with depression are more likely to use drugs, alcohol, maybe cigarettes, to try to combat that depression. And about 20% will actually develop a substance use problem along with their depression. Many people report that they'll turn to substance, commonly alcohol, as a way of self-medicating. Now, those same substances, actually, what we know can make some of those symptoms worse. And so it does sort of create this really vicious cycle that kind of begins to muddy the picture of kind of what came first. Was it, the alcohol or the substance, and that created a depressive, issue? Or was the depression there? I tried to self-medicate, and now I have that challenge. Excuse me. So it really does become a bit of a chicken egg situation. Which came first? Was it the depression or the substance use? And so treating substance abuse alone is not going to help with the treatment of depression. And so we really want to take a look at treating both of those things. If that's what we're kind of noticing, we really want to treat both of those things kind of at the same time or concurrently, just to make sure that we're really, minimizing the chance of relapse or reoccurrence. So again, a very quick overview of depression and what it sort of looks like. And so with that, I'm actually going to turn things over to my co-facilitator, Renata.
Thank you, Anne Renee. It'll just take me a moment here, everyone, to get this up and going. Oops. Just to switch over. Oops. Try that again. It keeps bouncing me back, Anne Renee. Do you want to maybe stop? There we go. Let's try that. Just working through the Zoom issues. How's that? That's looking good? Okay. Thanks, Anne Renee. All right. So maybe to summarize what Anne Renee has walked us through so far on the topic of depression, there's really also now what we want to highlight, the importance of getting help and support. And so this is such a beautiful video that just sort of opens that up for us. Let's have a look. It's called I Had a Black Dog.
I had a black dog. His name was Depression. Whenever the black dog made an appearance, I felt empty and life just seemed to slow down. He could surprise me with a visit for no reason or occasion. The black dog made me look and feel older than my years. When the rest of the world seemed to be enjoying life, I could only see it through the black dog. Activities that usually brought me pleasure suddenly ceased to. He liked to ruin my appetite. He chewed up my memory and my ability to concentrate. Doing anything or going anywhere with the black dog required superhuman strength. At social occasions, he'd sniff out what confidence I had and chase it away. My biggest fear was being found out. I worried that people would judge me. Because of the shame and stigma of the black dog, I was constantly worried that I'd be found out. So I invested vast amounts of energy into covering him up. Keeping up an emotional lie is exhausting. Black dog could make me think and say negative things. He could make me irritable and difficult to be around. He would take my love and bury my intimacy. He loved nothing more than to wake me up with highly repetitive and negative thinking. He also liked to remind me how exhausted I was going to be the next day. Having a black dog in your life isn't so much about feeling a bit down, sad or blue. At its worst, it's about being devoid of feeling altogether. As I got older, the black dog got bigger and he started hanging around all the time. I'd chase him off with whatever I thought might send him running. But more often than not, he'd come out on top. Going down became easier than getting up again. So I became rather good at self-medication, which never really helped. Eventually, I felt totally isolated from everything and everyone. The black dog had finally succeeded in hijacking my life. When you lose all joy in life, you can begin to question what the point of it is. Thankfully, this was the time that I sought professional help. This was my first step towards recovery and a major turning point in my life. I learned that it doesn't matter who you are, the black dog affects millions and millions of people. It is an equal opportunity mongrel. I also learned that there was no silver bullet or magic pill. Medication can help some, and others might need a different approach altogether. I also learned that being emotionally genuine and authentic to those who are close to you can be an absolute game changer. Most importantly, I learnt not to be afraid of the black dog, and I taught him a few new tricks of my own. The more tired and stressed you are, the louder he barks, so it's important to learn how to quiet your mind. It's been clinically proven that regular exercise can be as effective for treating mild to moderate depression as antidepressants, so go for a walk or a run and leave the mutt behind. Keep a mood journal. Getting your thoughts on paper can be cathartic and often insightful. Also keep track of the things that you have to be grateful for. The most important thing to remember is that no matter how bad it gets, if you take the right steps, talk to the right people, black dog days can and will pass. I wouldn't say that I'm grateful for the black dog, but he's been an incredible teacher. He forced me to reevaluate and simplify my life. I learnt that rather than running away from my problems, it's better to embrace them. The black dog may always be part of my life, but he'll never be the beast that he was. We have an understanding. I've learned through knowledge, patience, discipline and humour, the worst black dog can be made to heal. If you're in difficulty, never be afraid to ask for help. There is absolutely no shame in doing so. The only shame is missing out on life.
Right. So thank you, World Health Organization, for that beautiful video. If you want to share that with a loved one, it's a quick kind of search within YouTube. I had a black dog, and you'll find it. So let's move into treatment options now that we have a better understanding of how depression is defined and what effects it may have on us or those we love. What can we do to support recovery? And we're going to open with a quick little poll here. Again, just sharing your responses via the chat. True or false, everyone? The only effective treatment for depression is medication. Would that be true or false? The only effective treatment, for depression is medication. What do you think? So I'm just going to look to the chat here. I see quite a lot of falses coming through. Yeah, that doesn't sound quite right. It can't just be the only effective treatment. Okay. And for those of you that responded false, you would absolutely be right. Medication can be very effective. It is evidence-based and it can be a part of managing depression for many folks, but it's not the sole effective treatment for depression. So let's have a closer look. Let's just even start with medication. For many people, medication for depression can be very effective and it can support significant improvement in their symptoms. Some people find that they may need medication for a longer period of time, whereas others might need it for a shorter period of time, just enough to help them feel well enough to be able to access other treatments. So it's kind of more of a chemical boost that they get for a while until they get other sort of life processes going that can help them along. Now, it can also take, it's important to note, 4 to 6 weeks for the medications to start showing their positive effects. So it's really important that once the medication is started, it should be taken as directed. And then just to note, those positive effects from the meds won't actually kick in until that 4 to 6 week mark. It's also important to then closely monitor the onset of medication because antidepressants can come along with, like with many medication, with some risks and some side effects of their own, including sleep effects. So medications, again, will work differently with different people, and some meds, which are helpful for some, may actually increase the risk for others. Individuals with bipolar disorder, for example, or a family history of bipolar disorder, or a history of previous suicide attempts are particularly vulnerable. If the medication doesn't actually increase suicidal ideation, the risk of suicide is still higher during those first 2 months of antidepressant treatment. So we're wanting to really closely monitor how a person is doing and what they're experiencing. Now, why is it that the risk for suicide would actually be higher in those first 2 months? Well, just a quick explanation is that what happens is that the medication may quickly help to increase energy, but the suicidal thoughts may still not yet have reduced, which means that the individual may now have more energy than they did before to actually follow through on the thought. So there's a little bit of that risk period there. So again, if you notice symptoms that are getting worse with the medications, talk to your physician right away. And as with all medications, you want to continue to consult with your physician as to their use. Let your doctor know if you notice any new or worsening symptoms, and always talk to your doctor before stopping or making any change to the medication, because they're very finely tuned things, and so we don't want to kind of play around with them. Now, besides medication, there are other approaches that can treat depression, though often the best approach is to use a mix of treatments that kind of fits each individual's needs. So we're sort of tailoring a treatment plan that is going to suit them. Options for treatment are determined by a lot of different factors, including the person's age, their cognitive development, the severity and type of depression, the frequency and duration of their symptoms, if other disorders are present, social and cultural environment, a history of trauma, so many things. And also whether the physician and the individual have certain treatment preferences. That also comes into play. But just as a quick summary here, education and support can go a long way in understanding what you and your loved one is dealing with. And then, trying to determine that best tailored treatment can come through that education and support. It's also important to rule out other potential medical causes that could be could otherwise explain the symptoms. Anemia comes to mind, certain infections, certainly thyroid problems the mimics of thyroid issues will mimic symptoms of depression, pregnancy, postpartum, malnutrition, things like that, right? So we're always having to look to see if there's a different medical cause that could explain these symptoms. And then psychotherapy for you or your whole family could also be very helpful. Some of you might be familiar with some of these acronyms here on the screen. So CBT is cognitive behavioral therapy, IPT interpersonal psychotherapy, DBT is dialectical behavioral therapy, and then ACT is acceptance commitment therapy. These are all treatments that have been shown to be very effective for depression, and there's others as well, which we, for our venue today, we won't have a chance to really go further into the research around that. Now, finally, once thought to just be a complementary strategy, there's now evidence to support that exercise may have some effectiveness in treating depressive symptoms. Now, that said, it's not helpful to tell someone with depression that they just need to go for a walk. Statements like that could be dismissive of a person's suffering, and could oversimplify a really complex condition that requires a combination of supports. So speaking of supports, what about supportive strategies? We know how depression is defined, we know how it's treated by health professionals, but let's move into what we can do to further support that recovery. The strategies we're going to discuss here are helpful for everyone, but could be especially important when we or someone we love is having mental health challenges. So exercise had been mentioned as an effective strategy, and just as our body needs to be healthy, we want to make sure that other basic needs such as consistent sleep, healthy eating, and good hygiene are also valued. So is some combination and focus on any one of these basic building blocks of keeping our body well are going to be part of depression care. We also want to try and reduce or eliminate any unhealthy habits that could impact our wellness, such as smoking or drinking or substance misuse or even oversleeping or, other kind of things that we're accessing. Devices, right? Did our technology could get in the way and could kind of get us into a depressive loop. So those could be some of the habits that we're looking to sort of switch a little bit. Now, sometimes we may not always have the energy or interest to attend to these areas, but we want to continue to make them priorities and really celebrate the small successes that we can achieve. So you may want to focus on one or two small areas to start with, and you may need to just start with small steps, probably better that you do. So as an example, perhaps you don't have energy to go for a run, but maybe you could start with a walk outside to grab the mail, and that's a start. And so slow change leads to those bigger, more significant changes over time. Now, it can also be useful to access activities that we feel may help us to manage our energy and emotions, such as going out in nature or sitting in the sunshine, listening to some soothing or uplifting music, journaling or any form of personal or creative expression. Working out a little bit is mentioned, or doing some yoga or Pilates. And then engaging in pleasant hobbies or distractions. Now, distractions that we're not going to get lost in, but ones that just help us to shift our mood a little bit and give us a boost. And you might also consider building a coping kit. And what this is a container that you fill with physical items or activities that engage your senses in a positive way, that really help to ground you in the present moment and help you to feel better. So our senses, sight, sound, smell, touch, taste, and hearing. So this is just kind of a little example here of some favorite drinks or teas, the Play-Doh to get tactile, and fidget toys, essential oils, markers or adult coloring books, like you name it, whatever is kind of your toolkit of things that are just going to help you to feel, give you a boost that work for you well. Now, you can take this a step further by writing down a coping plan. This is where you write down what you notice in yourself when you're feeling depressed and what helps you to feel somewhat better. You know what works best for you, so be specific as you write down your own signs of depression. And then also you would include a list of activities that draw you out in a good way, that kind of give you that boost. And then also a list of people that you can go to for support. And this could include support groups, peer support groups, include their contact information. Now there's different variations of this coping plan. You can quickly kind of even Google search a coping plan for depression. The RAP program, Wellness Recovery Action Plan, is one template that is used by many. So Wellness Recovery Action Plan would be one of these really well formulated templates that you can follow. And so you would keep this list handy for when you need it, and even give a copy to a friend so that they know how to better support you in a tough time. So the people who are part of your coping plan, ideally, it'd be great if they had a copy as well. Now, it's important to stay connected to others when we're experiencing depression. The biggest rupture that happens with depression is we have disconnection. We experience disconnection from other people, certainly, but also from ourselves, from our faith, from our sense of connection to the world. So what we're looking to do, the antidote, is to reconnect. So positive connection with other people is a powerful coping tool that helps us to feel that we're not alone. And if it's not a lot of other people, it could be pets, nature, just the world, right? In some meaningful way. Now, of course, sometimes if we are feeling depressed, we're going to withdraw, and we may think that we don't want or need these supports. However, if we're struggling with mental challenges, we need to remind ourselves that supportive compassionate connection is needed all the more. So we are having to work against what the depression is telling us and move back into connection. Okay, now speaking of connection, what are some ways we can build or maintain these positive connections with others in our lives? So if you're thinking of, when you're kind of down and out and struggling and you don't have a lot of energy, what are some small yet significant steps you can take to reconnect? What would that look like? So go ahead, everyone, just sharing your thoughts. What would be realistic, kind of accessible ways that I can positively connect to others in the outside world, even if I have depression? So one of you shared to text someone. Yeah, if even if it's reaching out with text messages and conversing that way to start, getting out for coffee, right? Maybe it's just the coffee place around the corner where I don't have to go too far, and they meet you there. A phone call, right? Better yet, to that through text is to hear the voice over phone, or better yet, meet the person for coffee. Similar, one of you said a weekly scheduled sort of phone call with a friend or with certain folks, walks outside. Many of you mentioned going for a walk. Yeah, just getting out of the house, getting out into the world, getting some sun on your face, hearing the birds, feeling the breeze on your a little bit of exposure to the elements wakes us up. When you share, join a monthly book club. Well, so such a really neat idea, right? Kind of that positive distraction through a book, and talking with others, engaging with others through the book rather than just focusing on how we're feeling. Yeah, great ideas. And maybe joining in some recreational sports groups that aren't really super competitive, right? It's just for fun. And then one of you, of course, shared seeking professional help, right? When we're ready to make that step, yeah, getting more of that support through the healthcare providers. This is great. Thank you for sharing, everyone. There's all sorts of different creative ideas that we can come up with. And that's part of that connection, that support, is brainstorming some ideas on what helps me to feel awake and alive and just a little bit more hopeful, right? It's a bit different for everyone. And so it's nice to bounce some ideas off others. Oh, one of you shared in the chat again, just talking to strangers at the checkout, right? Just if it feels too vulnerable to meet with people, just connecting with a stranger at the grocery store as we're doing our little errands can make a big difference. Just receiving that smile and bit of connection. Okay, now one way we can continue to foster positive connection is through face-to-face contact, as many of you had shared through the chat responses. Now, while texting or use of technology can help us to stay connected, it can also become sometimes an unhealthy escape or source of unrealistic comparison with others, particularly with social media. Um, and we know that there's nothing like being in the presence of someone you care about or who cares about you. So having the phone call to hear their voice or actually physically meeting them in person. For instance, it may interest you to know that the dose of oxytocin, or what we call the cuddle hormone, this is a good feeling hormone that we get from being in connection with others. That dose of oxytocin that we get from sending a text message to someone, it pales in comparison to what is like a tenfold surge of oxytocin that we receive when we hold someone's hand or when we get or receive a hug. Okay, so there's like tenfold surge of oxytocin cuddle hormone when we're actually physically in the presence of others versus through the text. So if you want more of that good feeling cuddle hormone coming in, try for more in-person connection than simply through text or social media, although text and phone can certainly help. Now, along with connection to those who are close to us, it's also important to get involved with the world around us. So this may mean helping to arrange a visit with a family member or a friends, connecting with a club or a group that shares similar interests, kind of like the book club that many and sports clubs that you had suggested. This could also include volunteering and giving back to the community. There's good studies that show when we give back, and it gives us a sense of purpose, and it kind of gets us outside of our little world for a bit and engaged with a bigger sense of things. So volunteering has great happiness effects. Now, if you're here today as a support person for someone that does have or you suspect has depression, here are a few tips to help you in supporting them. First, remember to be empathic to what they're going through, even if you don't fully understand it. You don't have to fully understand it to have a sense as to how this is hard. Recognize that depression is a very real condition. It can be very damaging when left untreated, so we don't want to wait and hope that worrisome symptoms will just go away. If you suspect that someone is just depressed, trust your instinct or trust your gut, and then share your concerns. Bring up your concerns in a very loving, non-judgmental way. Even if you're unsure that depression is the actual issue, the distressing behaviors or emotions that you're seeing may still be signs of a problem or a concern that should be addressed. Pardon me. Keep yourself calm or regulated. Regulated is a term to help sort of calm our nervous system. So supporting someone as they manage depression takes time and energy, and it isn't easy. And so helping yourself, supporting yourself to remain calm, compassionate, and curious in your interactions is really key. Taking some breaks when you need to as a support person and can also be very helpful. And remember that symptoms can come and go. People with depression often cycle through it more than once, as Anne Renee had shared earlier. So if you see someone having symptoms again, remember that it's often normal and that you can help to connect them with coping strategies and supports that helped in the past, right? That's part of the work of, I don't want to call it the work, but the journey of living with depression is that through each reoccurrence of an episode, we learn more about what we can do for ourselves, and we gain stronger, we gain resilience. Now, whether you're experiencing symptoms of depression or trying to help others who are experiencing those symptoms, don't try to address these challenges all by yourself. Expect to need help and bring in other helpers. Be prepared to talk to family and friends or professionals, including medical and mental health professionals, to ensure that there are more comprehensive supports. If you're helping someone and that person won't talk with you about what's going on, encourage them to talk with another trusted person, whether that's another close friend, family member, coworker, or independent mental health professional. The important thing is to just have them get talking to someone. Now, also keep in mind that often finding the right treatments, supports, and strategies can take time, right? It takes time to fine tune and tailor that wellness plan. So stay committed to the process, keep communication lines open, keep track of important appointments, document important information around symptoms, medication, activities, and treatment plans. And then finally, find an advocate for yourself or an advocate for your loved one. The road for depression can be long and it can be windy, but knowing that you have someone in your corner can make a huge difference. And whether you're experiencing depression or helping someone through it, make self-care a priority. We can't fill up anyone else's bucket if our bucket is empty. For us to be at our best, we need to ensure that we can take the time every day to do something to care for ourselves and not just on the days where we're struggling. So also, whoops, I'm kind of jumping ahead here. Daily moments of gratitude have been proven to give us a more positive outlook. So be intentional about recognizing good moments in each day, the good things in our lives, even when times are challenging. So it's kind of like just, yeah, sharing counting your blessings for that day. And remember again that even small steps towards wellness can have a big difference in our symptoms over time. Again, that small yet intentional change can lead to bigger, more lasting change over time. So notice and keep track of daily moments of wellness, no matter how small they may seem, they're a big deal. So just a few takeaway messages here before we wrap up. Mental distress can and does create disconnection and isolation. The good news is there are treatment options and really effective strategies that can help and can have life be livable, more than livable, enjoyable. It is possible to have an enjoyable life even with depression being part of the picture. And supportive connections play a huge part in bridging that gap. Okay. So we really want to thank you for joining us today. Before Ashley sort of comes in and does the sign off, I encourage you to maybe take a screenshot of some of these, this slide here with all the resources. We're not able to provide you with a resource package, so this would be it. Just some of your handy go-tos of places to have available. The addiction helpline is obvious. The mental health helpline will get you connected to resources in your area. Of course, our national suicide hotline, 988. And then for our Indigenous folks, there's a Hope for Wellness helpline 24/7 that offers support with various workers who speak different Indigenous dialects. So that's incredible. That's available at that 1-800 number. So I think that's about it. Hello, Ashley.
Hello, thank you so much for this informative session. I'll leave this slide up for a minute in case anybody wants to take a picture of it. This will be included with the replay at the end, so I'll make sure that the information on this slide goes out with that email for people who might want to receive that information that way, share it with friends, forward it on. But yeah, I just want to say thank you. I know I have so many takeaways. I really appreciated the reminder to take it slowly when implementing new changes. I know I tend to go from 0 to 100 all at once, or at least I try to. So it was nice to be reminded that those slow changes usually lead to a more sustainable outcome, along with, all the other resources that you shared for dealing with depression. And I know I also really liked the coping plan. I have a very similar plan in my phone. It's just a list, really, of just things that bring me joy to remind me when I'm in a slump. So lots of good stuff in here. I encourage everyone else to share their takeaways in the chat too, if you're so inclined. And I will now take over the share here. Hopefully everybody can see that. Perfect. So again, I want to thank everyone who joined us for this session, whether you're here live today or you're watching the replay. Please note that the replay will be sent to everyone who has registered. And I just have a few notes as we wrap up our hour together. So let me put that in the chat for you. I see some takeaways coming in as well. Thank you for sharing. All right. So If you're in the Edmonton area or Edmonton and area, we'd love to invite you to our next in-person event, which is Crescendo on Saturday, May 9th at the Winspear Center. This event is produced by the John Cameron Changing Lives Foundation and presented by Keller Construction, and we're so excited to be their charity of choice in support of Kickstand. For those who don't know, Kickstand is a youth-focused mental health initiative providing free, accessible support for young people ages 11 to 25 through integrated counseling, peer support, and wellness services. And the Mental Health Foundation has been their proud philanthropic partner since 2019. So that's all I have for you today. Please note there will be a short 5-question survey that will pop up as soon as the webinar ends. So please share your feedback with us so we can continue improving these sessions. Thanks so much for attending. Thank you again to Renata and Renee. Well, we hope you take care of yourselves and we'll see you again soon. We'll give you a few minutes back for your day. Bye for now.
Take care.